If you and your spouse are both planning to delay Social Security until age 70, counting on that 8% a year bonus to stack up, there is a $1,200 a month hole in that plan that almost nobody talks about. Here is the number that actually matters. The difference between claiming the right way and claiming the wrong way can run past $250,000 over a lifetime for a married couple. And the strategy that sounds smartest on paper, both of you waiting until age 70, can end up being the one that hurts your spouse the most. Today we are going to walk through the 3 strategies that keep coming up whenever people search for how married couples should claim Social Security. But before we get there, I want to show you the one variable hiding inside all 3 of them, the one that can flip the entire math upside down, and how you protect your spouse if it ever hits. Because Social Security for a couple is not one decision. It is 2 decisions tied together with a rope, and if you only optimize one end of that rope, you can end up protecting the wrong person. Married, nearing retirement, and not interested in watching your spouse come up short because a plan looked good on paper. That is who this is for. If that is you, hit subscribe, because we are about to walk through the blind spot most retirement calculators never show you, and the fix most couples never get told about. Let's start with the 3 strategies, because you have probably seen versions of all 3. Strategy 1, both spouses delay to age 70. Strategy 2, the lower earner claims early while the higher earner delays to 70. Strategy 3, both of you claim at full retirement age. Run those 3 across thousands of household simulations, and one of them usually comes out ahead on paper. But here is the trap. The strategy that looks best for a healthy couple can turn into a disaster if the higher earner dies before ever filing a claim. Let me show you the numbers, because this is where most of the advice quietly falls apart. Think about Mark and Lisa. Mark is 62, he is the higher earner, and his benefit at full retirement age works out to $3,000 a month. Lisa is 60. She worked part-time for years, and her own benefit is $900 a month. They have done the math, and like a lot of couples, they have decided to both delay to 70, because that 8% a year bonus makes the spreadsheet look great. There is a second piece of this that trips people up too. While both of them are alive, a spousal benefit tops out at 50% of the higher earner's full retirement age amount, and that cap shrinks further if the lower earning spouse claims before their own full retirement age. So the size of the bonus you are chasing by delaying is only half the picture. The other half is what happens to the person left behind, and when. Here is what almost nobody explains to them. Survivor benefits do not automatically include that delayed bonus. If Mark actually files his claim at 70 and later passes away, Lisa steps into his full $3,720 a month. That is his $3,000 benefit boosted by 24% for the 3 years he waited past full retirement age. But if Mark dies at 65 before he ever files, Lisa does not inherit the $3,720. She inherits the benefit tied to where Mark stood when he died, not where he was heading. In this case, that means Lisa is stuck around $3,000 a month instead of $3,720. That is a permanent loss of $720 every single month for the rest of her life. Stop and sit with that for a second. It is not a rounding error. It is not a technicality buried in a pamphlet. It is $8,640 a year, every year, for as long as Lisa lives. Why does this happen? Because the delayed retirement credit is not something you earn like interest sitting in an account. It only locks in once a claim is actually filed. Waiting builds the credit. Filing banks it. If death arrives in between, the banking never happens. This matters more than it sounds like on the surface, because retirement itself is not cheap, even before you factor in a lost benefit. Fidelity estimates that an average retired couple needs roughly $330,000 after tax just to cover health care costs through retirement. Losing $720 a month from Social Security does not just shrink Lisa's spending money, it eats directly into the exact bucket she would need for medical bills down the road. This is the moment a lot of couples realize the advice they have been following was written for a generic couple, not for the specific ages, health history, and income gap sitting at their own kitchen table. So the standard advice says delay to 70. But what happens if Mark does not make it to 70? That is exactly where the math breaks, and it is exactly where most couples never think to look. Let's get into how you actually fix it. Once you see the trap, the next question is obvious. How do you get the benefit of delaying without leaving your spouse exposed if the years between now and 70 do not go as planned? That is the actual framework I use with couples, and it comes down to 3 moves. First, identify the gap. That is simply the number of years between now and the age the higher earner plans to claim. For Mark, delaying to 70 means an 8-year gap between age 62 and age 70. Second, quantify the loss. We already did this one. If Mark dies before filing, Lisa is looking at $720 a month less for the rest of her life. Stretch that out over something like 20 years of survivor benefits and discount it back to today's dollars, and you land on a loss with a present value somewhere around $130,000. Third, hedge the risk. There are 2 realistic ways to do this. The first, the lower earner claims their own benefit early, which brings in some income right away and takes pressure off savings during the bridge years. The second, and this is the one people rarely consider, a term life insurance policy on the higher earner, sized to roughly cover that $130,000 exposure. Here is why the second option works so well for a lot of couples. A 20-year term policy on a 62-year-old non-smoker with a death benefit around $130,000 typically runs somewhere between $30 and $50 a month. Compare that to the $720 a month Lisa stands to lose if Mark never files his claim. You are insuring a permanent monthly loss for roughly the cost of a phone bill. Insurance here is not about pessimism. It is about buying certainty for the years when the outcome is still unknown. The same reason you carry homeowners insurance without expecting your house to actually catch fire. I used to think delaying to 70 was simply the right move. Full stop, no exceptions. Then I worked with a couple where the husband died at 66. He had not filed yet. His wife ended up with his benefit locked in at age 66, not age 70. That $1,200 a month gap is the kind of mistake that reshapes how you look at every case afterward. Now, all of this assumes a fairly traditional setup where the ages are close and the husband is the higher earner. If that is not your situation, the standard 3 strategies can actually work against you. Say Lisa were the higher earner instead, and Mark were 10 years older. The math flips. In that kind of age gap, both of you claiming closer to full retirement age often protects the younger, higher-earning spouse's eventual survivor benefit better than either of you racing to 70. The specific numbers change household to household, but the framework, identify the gap, quantify the loss, hedge the risk, stays the same. Before we get into how to actually build this plan, there is a piece we have to deal with first, the fear sitting underneath all of this math. Because knowing the numbers is one thing. Actually acting on them is another. if part of you resists the idea of delaying to 70 because you keep thinking, what if I do not even make it there? You are not being irrational. There is a name for it. Psychologists call it mortality salience, the fear of dying young overriding the actual math in front of you. You have probably watched a friend, a coworker, maybe a parent, retire and then pass away within a few years. Your brain files that away as evidence, and it starts whispering, "Why wait? You might not be here." I do not blame anyone for feeling that way. Most retirement advice treats you like a row in a spreadsheet, not like a person who has watched people they love run out of time. It is completely fair to want some of your money now, while you are both healthy enough to enjoy it. Here is a different way to hold the question. Instead of asking, "What if I die before 70?" ask, "What if I live to 95? For a 62-year-old man, the odds of reaching age 85 are around 50%. For a woman the same age, the odds are even higher. The real risk most couples are underestimating is not dying too early. It is living long enough to run out of money. The hedge we just walked through lets you plan for both outcomes at once. You can still delay for the larger benefit, and your spouse is still protected if the years do not go the way you hoped. I remember sitting at a kitchen table with a couple where the husband had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Every plan they had built over the past decade got torn up in that one conversation. That is when it really landed for me. The math only holds up if you assume good health. So we rebuilt their plan assuming the worst case up front, and it gave both of them something a calculator rarely delivers: actual peace of mind. None of this means you did something wrong by not thinking about this sooner. Most people do not, because most of the advice they have been handed never mentions it. The gap is not in you, it is in the advice. Now let's put this together with a scenario a lot of couples do not plan for either. What happens if the market drops hard during the years you are trying to bridge? Say you are a few years into that bridge period, still working toward age 70, and living partly off your investment portfolio while Social Security waits in the background. Then the market drops hard, something in the range of 30%, similar to what happened in 2022. A portfolio sitting at $500,000 falls to around $350,000 almost overnight. Two different couples handle that moment two different ways. The first couple panics. They were not expecting the drop. They do not have a cushion, so they file for Social Security early, at reduced amounts, locking those lower numbers in for life. Worse, their portfolio never fully recovers, because they were forced to sell into the bottom just to cover living expenses. The second couple built a buffer ahead of time, something like 1 to 2 years of expenses sitting in cash, along with the term life policy we already talked about. When the drop hits, they do not touch their stocks. They keep living off the cash bucket, they keep delaying Social Security as planned, and by the time the market recovers, their portfolio is essentially intact. If something happens to the higher earner during that stretch, the life insurance is still sitting there as a backstop. Same market, same couple ages, same starting numbers. The only difference is that one household had already made a decision before the pressure hit, and the other was deciding for the first time in the middle of a crisis. A 30% drop in the first year of a 5-year bridge period can permanently cost a household something like $150,000 if they are forced to sell at the bottom instead of riding it out. That is not a Social Security number. That is a portfolio number. But it happens during the exact years your Social Security strategy depends on you staying the course. Notice that none of this is about predicting the market. Nobody knows when the next 30% drop shows up. It is about making sure a bad few months in the market cannot force your hand on a decision you meant to make on your own terms. So how do you actually build this in a way that does not require you to be a financial planner yourself? Let's get into the 3 steps. None of this requires becoming a financial planner or checking the market every day. It comes down to making 3 decisions in the right order, ideally before you actually need any of them. Step 1. Run your own what-if numbers. Pull up your Social Security statement or use the SSA's own online tools and look at your benefit at 62, at full retirement age, and at 70. Then ask the harder question nobody puts on the printout. What does my spouse get if I die before I file? For Mark and Lisa, that gap works out to $720 a month or $8,640 a year for the rest of Lisa's life. Step 2. Price out a term life policy sized to your bridge years. You are not buying this for 30 years. You are buying it to cover the specific stretch between now and when the higher earner plans to claim. For someone in their early 60s, a 20-year term policy with a death benefit in the $100,000 to $150,000. Range often runs somewhere between $30 and $50 a month. The exact number depends on your health, but the shape of the trade stays the same. A small, known cost protecting against a large, unknown one. Step 3. Build a cash buffer before you need it. Somewhere around 1 to 2 years of expenses, sitting in cash or short-term bonds, is usually enough to keep you from being forced to sell stocks during a downturn, which is exactly what wrecks a bridge strategy for couples who did not plan ahead. I worked with a couple who did all 3 of these steps. The husband passed away at 68, 2 years before his planned claiming age. The life insurance paid out $120,000 tax-free. His wife used that money to bridge the gap, kept living on schedule, and was able to let his benefit grow to age 70, exactly as they had originally planned. She is now collecting $3,720 a month for the rest of her life, instead of $3,000. Over a couple of decades, that is well over $100,000 in extra income, from a decision made years before anyone knew it would matter. I have run these numbers for dozens of couples at this point, and there is a sentence I hear almost every time. Why did not anyone tell me this before? It is a fair question, and the honest answer is that most advice stops at the spreadsheet and never gets to the kitchen table. The 3 strategies both delay to 70, lower earner claims early, or both claim at full retirement age, are still a reasonable starting point. But by themselves, they are incomplete. They do not account for what happens if the higher earner does not make it to their planned claiming age. They do not account for a market drop landing during your bridge years, and they do not account for an age gap or an income gap that does not match the traditional setup those calculators were built around. The framework underneath all of this stays simple even when your situation is not. Identify the gap between now and when you plan to claim. Quantify what your spouse actually loses if life does not cooperate. Then hedge that specific risk with insurance, with a cash buffer, or with the timing of when the lower earner files. If you are married and heading toward this decision, and you do not want your spouse to end up short because a plan only worked on paper, subscribe to the channel. We will keep showing you the blind spots the standard advice tends to skip. You do not have to get this perfect. You just have to be informed before you file, not after.